Good evening, 12s, and welcome to the Seahawks 360 podcast, where we get the Seahawks from every angle every week. I'm Candace Higgins,
Now I'm Tino Ganasius.
and we are back to discuss yet another Seahawks loss. The Seahawks go down in overtime to the Los Angeles Rams, 26-20 at home. And this was a game that I can only describe as drunk slash a roller coaster. Maybe drunk on a roller coaster was
Sure.
more accurate of a description
No,
of.
ain't nothing wrong. Hey, ain't nothing wrong with that. That makes it sound like it was a good time.
Guess that's fair. So for a point, probably not as exciting as it well. Well, it did have its exciting moments. So I think it's hard to get into this game and summarize it in a whole. I think this game, in my opinion, came down to moments. And so I think when discussing it, it's probably best to talk about the moments because uh when it like it just said, it's just hard to there's no quick way to just go over everything that's happened. Geno Smith threw three interceptions, almost threw four. So that in itself, I would say were some of the big moments. Um, there was a blocked punt by the Seahawks special team stepping up. Cody White decided to be him in some areas. A lot to discuss, but Tino, let's start with you. What stood out to you as the pivotal moments, or like the most important moments, rather, in this game?
Every time the offensive line stepped on the field, that's my pivotal moments. Um, that's my takeaway, right? I think there are, and we'll dig into the details of the defense. We'll dig into, what this team looks like moving forward. But my takeaway from this game and my takeaway from most every football game I watch, no matter what the level is if you don't have at minimum like average offensive line play, you're not going to go anywhere, right? Your team is not going to be good over the long haul. You may have moments, but you won't do it. Even the great Tom Brady, right? When he had such a horrible line, I remember a couple of years there where they just ran five wide every single play, basically. And it was, their running game was essentially short passes because they knew he wasn't going to have any time because their line was so bad, right? And he couldn't win that way. You cannot win without an offensive line. And this team is, despite leading the NFL in passing, is predicated on balance and trying to be able to run the ball, and they simply cannot do it. So, to me, the story of this game, and quite honestly, the story of this season, is the ineptitude of the offensive line. And by that, I mean Scott Huff, the new offensive line coach. I mean Coach Grubb's inability to scheme around a porous offensive line. It's John Schneider trying to put band-aids on a big, huge health problem for the Seahawks. It's the individuals on the line that we'll get into. It's counting on Abe Lucas coming back and not coming back. It's the regression of Charles Cross from the beginning of the season. It's Christian Haynes not even being active for this game, right? When Dominic Pooney for the 49ers, who was picked after, I think, 6 picks after Haynes,
Right.
he's playing like an all-pro. It's Connor Williams forgetting how to snap the ball, right? It's Mike Jarrell kind of looking like a sixth-round pick from a Division II school for the last couple of games. It's all of it put together. If you can't block, your quarterback isn't going to look good. If you can't block, your running back is not going to look good. If you can't block, the only deep passes that you can complete are literally chuck and duck, which is where the completions that we completed long. The thing I will say, and runs a little bit counter to what people have been saying on Twitter, is Geno Smith is a quality quarterback. Geno Smith is an above average NFL quarterback. I said it before, I'll say it again. He's accurate, he's smart, he makes very good decisions with the football. Nobody plays quarterback at a high level in the NFL without protection. Nobody, right? So the comparison I made to Geno in my mind when I was watching is think about Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins can put up 400 yards, even 500 yards, as he did one game this season already with Atlanta. Kirk Cousins can put up all the stats in the world, right? And look like a Hall of Fame quarterback when he has weapons and when he has some semblance of an offensive line. When Kirk Cousins, we saw it with the Vikings, we see it with Atlanta at times, when he's under duress, when he can't have time to pick apart the defense, he throws picks and he looks horrible. He doesn't even look like a starting quarterback. We've gone from thinking Michael Penix should be starting because Cousins looks so bad to Cousins having a 500-yard game. And I think Geno falls in that same category. Football is the one sport, and I'll be done after this, is the one sport where everyone on the field has to have the other players on the field on their team perform in order to be successful, right? Basketball, at times, you can go one-on-one and score and look great. Baseball is very much an individual sport, right? Football is the one sport where everybody has to be in concert and you're reliant upon other players performing for you to play well. And Geno is a prime example of that. So could he have made some better throws? Absolutely. But every quarterback has bad games every once in a while. It's the offensive line. I don't think the problem is Geno. And you're not winning anything without controlling the ball a little bit, controlling time of possessions, and being able to block enough for Geno to be able to get the ball out. So that's the story to me. That's the story of the season. It's the mistake of John Schneider, right? It's the offensive line coach's fault. As I said, it's Ryan Grubb's inability to figure out how to call plays that don't require as much time. And that the offensive line needs to be completely revamped. I love Charles Cross. Charles Cross looked terrible in this last game.
Yeah, he did.
Terrible, right? Your boy Laken Tomlinson was the only one that looked okay, at least according to the grade. And that's saying something.
It is. It's
That's saying something. So for me, like overall, at any level, whoever you root for, whether it's the Seahawks or for me, University of Michigan football, right? You have to have an offensive line. You have to. And if you don't have an offensive line, you're not going to score points. And then the entire onus is on the defense, and the defense eventually is going to get tired or they're going to make mental mistakes, and you're not going to win. That's the story of Sunday's game against the Rams. That is certainly the story for me of this 2024 Seahawks team.
Yeah, it's really hard to disagree with that because there's a lot to be said about Geno's picks and how at fault he is for some of those things. And I do believe that he does take some responsibility. I think he is ultimately the decision maker. I think I think he's got some freedom at the line of scrimmage to make some adjustments accordingly.
Mhm.
We can discuss whether those adjustments are good based on Ryan Grubb's system, but I think he does have some freedom. But ultimately, I do believe for sure one of those balls should not have been thrown. I'd rather he just took the sack,
Mhm.
particularly on the drive where I believe watching the replay, he got hit in the arm. I want to say that was the second interception that he threw. Um, he explained in the post conference that he was trying to throw it out of the back of the end zone, which I think was the right decision. But well, it's the right decision if you're not watching a guy like literally be able to high five you because when he threw that ball, I mean he was basically dead to rights
Right.
already at that point. Just like the sack, especially given situation. There was a time before where he took a sack and they put him out of field goal range, so maybe that's what's in his head. But given you got to be aware enough to know you're not taking a sack there doesn't take you out of field goal range. Live to see another down. Particularly that one, I hated to see him throw that ball.
Mhm.
But ultimately, I completely agree. Um, I do still think that Geno is an above average quarterback, but I understand why people are frustrated with Geno and why people want to move on from Geno. Why the criticism has been he's good, not great. I am of the opinion that he can be great,
Mhm.
but when you continue to see performances like this, it's hard to, it's harder and harder to defend if there isn't recent evidence to support your argument. And frankly, it just comes down to a good thing for me. I do believe, similar to Kirk Cousins, right? If you gave him the right weapons, the right support, the right
Mhm.
system. Things do need to be right. And I think he can perform at an elite level. Maybe not as consistently as you want, though, but I also feel like that's something that people are so quick to want to move on from to get the guy. And I don't think they realize that the guy is like top 1% in the world. And so like you can leave that looking for the 1%, but also like your chances of getting worse go greatly up. And that's kind of just where I stand right now on the
Mhm.
Geno front. But he's a big storyline coming out of this because his game was defined by moments. Even in the beginning, I think that offense looked awkward. I think it looked uncomfortable. I think it looked, Geno particularly looked unsure of himself. But to your point, I saw a stat by Hayden Winks that sort of illuminated this, and you may have come across it as well. Geno has faced an NFL high 93 pressures that were originally blocked but still got pressure within 2.5 seconds, which essentially means that it was schemed to be protected.
Mhm.
But the guys just got beat. Like they
Yep.
just don't have the dudes. And I think there is some culpability on Grubb's part. I do think there are a lot of things they could do to help out Geno that they don't do.
Right.
They are just now beginning to explore under center play action or under center at all, which is
Mhm.
insane to me that it took us and we are in this deep into the season, approaching the bye week, week 9, right? Yeah, week 8, week 8.
Fine.
Yeah, week 9.
Mhm.
This deep, basically halfway through the season, well over halfway through the season, and we're just now beginning to see a significant portion of that.
Right.
To me, it's unexcusable, right? There were things that we could have been doing to help out Geno to have defenses respect what we're doing now way more. I mean,
Yep.
but I think there's only so much Grub can do when it comes to personnel. When it comes to personnel, like you said, this is years. This is a culmination of years of poor choices and even recent poor choices. Like you said, Pooney's doing great over there, and we just continue to miss and miss and miss. And Esco just gone from the team, and Creed Humphrey is out here winning. He's out here playing at elite level as what the best center, I think, at this point with
Mhm.
Jason Kelsey gone.
Mhm.
He's
You can
the
make the
best center
argument.
in the
You can
league.
make the argument. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean that's a
Let me
huge miss, and
think about this though. Like, so people want a new quarterback, and would it be awesome to have Jaden Daniels? Yeah, like he's dope, right? He's turning DC upside down. But Caleb Williams not, and Caleb, I do believe
and
in
he was a
Caleb's
sure
talent.
thing, right?
I think right, yeah, I think Caleb's gonna be good, but he hasn't like been a world beater yet. Drake May shows talent, but the book's still out on him. Anthony Richardson, who was a high pick, right? Number 4 overall, I believe, by the Colts,
Mm-hmm.
is
Who I
benched
did
at this
want,
point in time.
frankly. I
Bryce
want
Young, right? Bryce Young with no offensive line looks terrible. You go down that list and it's hit and miss. Let me ask you this. From a talent standpoint and an ability standpoint, is Jared Goff better than Geno Smith? And what I mean by
yes.
that is you put Geno Smith with the best offensive line in football, a two-headed monster in the running game, Sam Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? And Penei Sewell protecting him, amongst others. Is is Geno Smith going to be an MVP candidate with that kind of talent around him? Potentially, yes. Now, if someone says Goff is better, I think it's pretty subjective, right? And I could understand someone saying that, but it's close. If you're being real about it, it's close. They
Yep.
put Jared Goff under center a ton. He
Mm-hmm.
runs a ton of bootleg and a ton of play action because that
Yep.
fits what he does. He has a great intermediate ball, which Geno Smith does as well, right? There are all these things that he has. It's like the opposite of what Geno has. Now, Geno has weapons, but he doesn't have any protection. I go down that list. So, if you're saying we need somebody other than Geno or I want to rebuild, right? Rebuilding and picking a quarterback in the draft is a roll of the dice. And it's like under a 50% hit rate for those top quarterbacks. You're lucky if you find one. Everyone thought no, there were very few people that made the argument Jaden Daniels over Caleb Williams. Very few, a
Yep.
handful.
Yep.
And it's so clear that Jaden Daniels is a transcendent quarterback, right? A transcendent talent. So you're rolling the dice. Also, and then as I said, you go down this list. Russell Wilson, well, they got rid of Russell Wilson for him, right? Baker Mayfield is playing pretty well at times because he has protection. Even a Jalen Hurts is talented in a different way, but I would say he's not necessarily more talented than Geno Smith is. But he has a great offensive line, right?
Yeah.
Or historically has. Maybe not this year. But you go down that list and it literally every quarterback is reliant upon their protection, right? It's about the talent around you. Now you can get away with a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes not having great weapons and being able to spread the ball around the way Tom Brady did. But their lines are good, right? They're still given some time to throw. And I'm not saying Geno is one of them. He's below, which is why you have to provide the protection. It makes me crazy. As someone
Yeah.
who loves to run the ball, believes in running the ball, believes in investing in the offensive line smartly, this team is really hard to watch right now because they can't run and they can't protect.
Yeah. Yeah,
Brutal.
I agree. I mean, they really can't run offense. I do think there are some things about just the system itself that I don't think is conducive to sustainability in the
Sure.
NFL. I think Grubb would need to make some changes. I don't Yeah, and I don't know if living in shotgun is going to really be sustainable, particularly when you don't have a ton of variations with pistol or anything like that. But he's seeming to be aware enough to make these changes. I just think they're happening too slowly. I don't think. I mean, and truly, I know you can't install a whole new playbook. So maybe we do see, maybe these lessons are valuable in year two, and like
Mm-hmm.
it can look like a more sustainable NFL offense. You
Mm-hmm.
hope.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just a lot of things working against this offense. And I think there are some legitimate concerns also about the defense.
Yep.
But speaking of moments, this defense had incredible moments on the flip side.
Mm-hmm.
Ability to consistently stop the run game, consistently. Frankly, the ability to, I think, make Stafford have to earn his yards. He still ends up with 298 yards, but it didn't come easy. He had to throw 44 times to get there. He still threw a pick. You still picked them off. Ultimately, you held Kyron Williams to 69 yards. There really weren't any other threats in the run game beyond that.
Right.
But you did
3.1 yards a
phenomenal
carry.
in defending the run. And then you were able to truly see what this defense is supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
because it thrives in the passing game. Now,
Until
that
Reek decided to until Reek decided to brain fart all over the field a couple of
yeah,
different
but I gotta be honest, I think they were winning that anyway, despite the Seahawks not getting points on the board or frankly, even if they got the ball back, I think I agree. We talked about this here. I think I agree with the decision to just go for it because I
sure,
think if Stafford's getting the ball, they score.
sure.
I
But
just it's
so
McVay. I just think that's what happens. Now it did happen on absolute brain fart. I agree with you, but I think that they would have scored anyway.
well
Maybe
he
just
just yeah, he went to a couple of his like go-to plays,
yeah,
right?
like they were
And
going to score.
and he schemed up a couple like it was two pass plays and all of a sudden they were basically in field goal range.
Right.
But yeah, to me that was McVay. But I want to get back to the offense just for a minute because the idea that you can't get a yard, like, Mike McDonald said today, it's honestly like most of the game was that you had two fourth and ones you couldn't get. You couldn't get if you can't get a yard on fourth and one, you don't deserve to win. And I really believe in that idea, right? That you have to be able to get you have that much, you have to have a little push on the line to be able to do that, or have a go-to play where you can do it. And what it leads me to, and you're the one who kind of brought this up indirectly, is you got to get under center, right? In a fourth and one. And nothing drives me more nuts than a fourth and short or third and short and NFL teams are in shotgun. Nothing
Yes.
drives me more crazy than that.
Yeah, for
You
real.
got to get
Definitely.
Geno under center, but the problem is now you're predictable, right? And so I remember when Peyton Manning was in Indianapolis and Tom Moore was their offensive coordinator for years. And it was Reggie Wayne, Edgerrin James, and they literally Dallas Clark, like they ran out of the same formation they had all of these variations of plays, right? They'd start running off tackle with edge, and then they run a play action play to Reggie Wayne, and then they'd run something that looks exactly the same, and they throw to the tight end Dallas Clark, and they had all these variations off the same formation. And because they were under center, they were able to run the ball and pass the ball. And they said it was very simple, but you never knew what they were doing, right? Because the formation never gave any tells about where they were headed. And I think for the Seahawks, and a lot of NFL teams for that matter, but the Seahawks in particular, it's you can kind of predict what they're doing most of the time, right? And so when it comes down to getting that yard, if the defense knows you're going to run, right, and it's not these BS like play action stuff that they're running out or 3rd and 1 and trying to pass to the tight end and it's out of the spread formation. I'm saying get under center, like you said, run some play action, get the linebackers and safeties away from the line eventually, and have some be unpredictable, right? And so that when it is time to go get that yard, you're under center, it's a normal thing, and most of the time you can run it, but once in a while you can run bootleg or you run play action and pick up a big chunk of yards. It's just to me it's simple, and right now they're trying to overcomplicate everything. And I think that they said that was the case on the defense, and I wouldn't be surprised to hear them say it's the case on the offense as well.
Yep.
Simplify, right? You gotta just go out there and beat the butt of the dude across from you and start there, and then we can move forward.
I like it in theory, but I think with the personnel, it's not possible. I think I'm not sure I trust that personnel to not give any tails. I just don't. I don't trust any of those dudes to not. I mean, think about the brain farts we've seen from Anthony Bradford alone. We've got a 6th round guy, rookie, like you said, thrown in there. He's not got a ton of experience at the high level. I don't think you can do that even with the line that you have now. I'm not even sure I trust the tight ends not to do that, to give off tails. And so, there's just so much newness too. I think it also takes some time, some continuity to be able to work through being able to
Mhm.
master that. And I think you've really got to focus on it from day one training camp. And that's not just something that they were able to do. They were just trying to install fundamentals in this in an entire system.
Mhm.
So I agree with you in principle. I'd like to see that, but I understand their standpoint and they don't feel like simplicity is best. And when you already feel like you're a little bit predictable as it is, I think for the offense, their best bet may be actually variation just to try to avoid tendencies as much as you can.
Yeah.
Um, and try to catch teams off guard just by putting things that weren't already on film. I think that's your better shot because I don't think that you can't hang your hat on doing anything well. And I mean, I think about that 4th and 1 decision to go for it or not. And I'm going in my head, what would have been the better play? You would say a quarterback sneak, but again, your guys can't get pushed at the line. And so Geno just hopping over somebody and and he's risking getting hurt. Like, can you successfully do RPO? Maybe, but also maybe not. I guess you just can't trust. I mean, you're down DK. Is there anything you can really go to? And the
Well, it's
question is
brutal,
no.
right? Because you're right, because you got Charles Cross, who is talented but inconsistent right now. You got Laken Tomlinson, who played better than really anybody else on that line.
Sadly.
And you got Connor Williams at center, who is supposed to be a very good run blocking center. You got Brady Russell lined up in the backfield, who obviously is your best blocking full H back tight end type player. And you're running off the left side because that's what you believe is your strength or you can count on. That's where the talent is, at least. And you get blown up in the clutch. And it was not like one ram in the backfield, it was 3, 4 rams in the backfield, right? It's embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's embarrassing. And I just, I don't know. I know we're going to talk about the defense first, but I'm just going to put it out there. Like, this is the point in time where I think organizations, the Seahawks in this case, have to ask themselves very realistically, what is your goal for the rest of the season? What are you trying to get out of the rest of the season? Because in my opinion, and we'll talk about it more later, it's the goal is to play mistake-free football and for players and coaches to understand what they do well and to install the system and the trust that's needed to be very good next year, right? That to me looks like a successful season because I don't think this team is going anywhere with the personnel on the offensive line that they have. It's just not. So how do we play? How do we create a cohesive defense that plays with synergy where they're trusting one another, right? And offensively, what's our identity and what are we gonna be moving forward, knowing there are gonna be big changes on that O line?
Yeah, I think that I will say I think that was the goal anyway. We just felt like with the talent, they could make a playoff push. And frankly, they're an offensive line away from doing that. There are a couple of dudes that here's what they needed. They needed a lot of things to break their way on the
Yes,
offensive line. They
yes,
needed
we
Connor
talked about that.
Williams to return to 75% of what he was before. They
Mhm.
needed Charles Cross to take a leap. They needed
Christian
at
Haynes.
least Fant to stay healthy. Dear Lord, George Fant can't even put together 10 snaps. He got Abraham Lucas's knees. Now, I believe when he's playing, I think he's an upgrade over what they have right now. And I think that's clear,
Sure.
but
From terrible
I
to
think they
above
needed that.
average.
They needed a serviceable, like just serviceable or decent right tackle. And then they knew they had the question marks at the guard spots. And so they needed at least three things to go right. And they're over 3. I mean, really, they're over 5 right now, but they're over 3. They also needed Langdon Tomlinson to not be a trash can, but that seems to be dependent on the game.
Right.
that,
Right.
seems, that seems to be game dependent. So
Yep.
they really did. They missed on every angle, everything that they needed to go right went wrong. Um, and I think there's only so much that you at this point can do about that. Um,
Now, but let me ask you this though. How many, if you're the GM, right? If you're, and I love John Schneider. I love him. He won us a Super Bowl. I love him. But you can't go into the offseason with that many question marks and leave the offseason into the regular season with hoping that four of the five positions, or let's assume Connor Williams is good, right? And let's assume Charles Cross is good, which I think is a decent assumption going into the season. You're hoping, like, and you don't know if three of the five, 60% of the offensive line is gonna be okay or not. There's too many question marks for me
I
to
don't
go
think
into it
John
with that.
Snyder had Fant as a question mark. That's where we disagree. They clearly felt like they could count on him to give some serviceable snaps. And so they, in
Okay,
their
but
minds,
but you got
hindsight,
okay. So I'll grant that you're getting. I don't believe it, but or I don't agree with it.
yeah,
So
you don't
let's
agree with it,
assume.
but I think they
Okay, that's fine.
genuinely
So let's
believe it.
assume they thought they were going to get some serviceable snaps from George Fant at right tackle, and
Yeah,
if it wasn't George Fant, it was Abe Lucas. Okay, you're still hoping, right? You're hoping and
oh, for sure.
praying that 40% of your line is gonna be okay. And
Yeah,
you put a
not for sure.
band-aid with the old guard, left guard who nobody wanted, a right guard who you knew was terrible, who had feet of concrete, and you invested a third round pick in the wrong guard, right? And you're hoping that this third round pick who's raw out of UConn, not out of the SEC, out of UConn, you're hoping that he's going to be okay. You can't hope with the offensive line. You just can't.
I
From
will
in
say
my
this.
opinion, you could
I
because
will say this.
you can have a very good offensive line and an okay running back and still have a good running game. The offensive line has to be good for anyone else to be good.
I agree with you to some extent. I would disagree that there's a sure thing when it comes to offensive line. I just think when it comes to acquiring offensive linemen, no one's letting go of a sure
Okay,
good talent,
then
right?
you
So
move up.
you're not trading for any all-pro offensive lineman at any point unless they're old. And then there
Brandon,
is a question,
Brandon Scherf is out there and available.
but he's old, and even that has question marks. We can't
Okay,
pretend like
you can be an old offensive lineman and still be a technician, still be good. We've
but
seen plenty of,
it doesn't guarantee you're good because you don't
no,
know the
but you're
injury.
also not, it's not Lakin Tomlinson.
It's not, but also I just truly think that you can't guarantee things with injury when you're talking about older players. There's always some risk. right? If they're available for a reason, either because it's a gamble in the draft
Yeah,
or
George Fant.
because there's injury risk, or does this translate? I mean, how many guys have we gotten who are good from other teams on offensive line and then they come here and they're trash? Gabe
Sure.
Jacks. I mean, seriously, it's happened almost every year. I just don't think that the older offensive lineman installation is any by
But
any means a
I'm not
guarantee
just arguing
for.
that though. I think I'm not just arguing that. I'm saying too, like I understand that Coach McDonald, and I love Byron Murphy too, but I understand that Coach McDonald is a defensive coach and he wanted his guy, and that Murphy was a good value there. But there was a huge run on offensive linemen after Murphy was selected, right? I also think they could have, he's got no problems dealing to pick up another pick, right? I know that it costs a lot to get a two, but you could have dealt up and got a two. What I'm saying is it's not. I'm not saying necessarily go out and sign a free agent offensive lineman, although Michael Onwenu was out there. I'm
Mhm.
saying, right, and you're spending more resources to get him in there, but he's a much better talent, a much better player than Williams or Tomlinson. But you got to spend real capital. And
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
that they have, right? I get that Cross was a top 10 pick, but you've got to spend real,
But that's
maybe,
their only example. To your
right?
point, that is their only example.
Maybe it's re-signing Damian Lewis, right? He signed for a lot of money to go to Carolina. And I
Mhm.
get that he wasn't great when he was here, but he's playing pretty darn good for Carolina right now. And
Heck of a lot better than what we
he would
got.
have looked, how much better would Damian Lewis look than Tomlinson or Bradford right now?
Seriously.
Don't
Yeah.
spend the money on. You could also make the argument. I get that, like Aaron Donald or that defensive tackle is super valuable now because it's the shortest route to the quarterback. But I would have rather them spent that first round pick on the O line because now it's a wasted season because the O line is Swiss cheese. You know,
Yeah.
it's frustrating for me. It's incredibly frustrating because I think they're wasting DK Metcalf's prime right now,
Mhm.
right? The development of JSN I think is a little slower because they can't get to the full route tree most of the time. K9 is in his prime, right? Because running backs don't last that long. You have
Right.
a top probably eight from a talent standpoint, running back, and a very good backup who could start on some teams, and they're not worth anything. Well, five teams maybe, right? But he's a good backup, and he's a good complement to K9. My
He's a
point
good
is,
compliment.
sure. My point is you're wasting a lot of talent
Yeah.
because your offensive line is just bad, is bad.
Yeah. No, 100% agree.
I have zero
So
confidence in the offensive line. Zero.
we know what's next. We know
Right.
that's going to be a huge point of emphasis. And I do feel like just with the urgency, not just with the change of coaching staff, but also just with what's been put on film, that's going to be a point of emphasis going into next season. And now there's nothing that can be done for this season. But I agree with you in the sense of, I mean, this year was always going to be about finding what you're good at, um, and finding your identity and like what it takes to execute your identity, right?
Mhm.
Like, what does it actually take? Because I mean, Mike McDonald made it clear what he wanted this team to be, but it looks so far away because of personnel, right? And so I think it comes down to, can you marry the two? What are some plays that you can go to marry what you have with what you want to be, and experimenting with that? And it's going to be some trial and error and pushing different buttons and seeing if you can take advantage of certain matchups and play around with that. But I'd like to see this offense find some go-tos, at some point. That would be my main thing, in my opinion. Uh, Also, I think the defense, we need to see consistency because this defense has been extremely up and down across the
Mhm.
scale. And I don't know if it's a matchup thing or what, but I would like to see them find consistency with being good at something. I would prefer stopping the run, or at least to like not be a liability in that regard.
I I want to see them get home with the pass rush because I think talent wise, the while the secondary hasn't, has been up and down, I think the secondary is talented enough that they will figure it out. I think the linebacking core, whoever's next to Ernest Jones next year, I think the linebacking core is going to be fine. I'm assuming they're going to re-sign him. He looks pretty awesome to me. Um, but the D line is great, and I'm on record saying they're great and talented, but no sacks, right? On Sunday? I believe it was no sacks on Sunday for the
Um,
Seahawks.
I thought they
And
had at least one sack.
let me see.
No, actually, no, you're right. But they did have some pressure.
Okay,
So
but it's
the
Matthew
team
Stafford.
still is popping pressures. They just need to.
Matthew Stafford can't move.
Is what?
Matthew Stafford can't move. He's
Yeah, but they also have a really good offensive line.
they
They
was
do.
and they had two of their starters out, right?
Well,
Steve Avila and Jonah Jackson were out.
that's fair.
You got two starters out against what's supposed to be a vaunted defensive line. They couldn't get home. Part of that is scheme. Part of that is their passing game is really, really good. But the D line has to. They got to show out. If this defense is going to be good, they got to be able to get home, right? Especially against a team with Puka Nacua for a quarter and a half and Cooper Kupp.
Well,
I'm not that worried about the defense. I think the defense is taking time to get better, but they have elite talent at all three levels, as I've said, as we've said. And Ernest Jones looks like the real deal. The defense, I'm not worried about. I think the
I
defense
can't.
played well, and they got hung out to dry in this game.
They did. I can't
Got
say I'm not worried about the defense because I would just be basing it off of this game and dismissing the travesty that was the Bills game. So I can't
sure.
say I'm not worried about the defense, but I do think I care more about pressures than sacks. So maybe I'm just a little bit biased in that way. Like I just want to see disruption, and I think it was clear that Stafford and that Rams team weren't able to effectively get into their offense, and whether they actually got home or not. I believe that they definitely, whether it was, sending different rushers, all of different things. I mean, maybe it was four-man fronts, but they were just confusing them at the line of scrimmage. I think there was a lot of that, and I think it worked. And frankly, I'm fine with that. You would love, yes, in a perfect world to get those sacks, but I'm not going to panic because the guys aren't getting sacks if you're disrupting the play. So, um,
This is, but
I'm team disruption.
I, I agree. I think I understand that, like, that hurries and, knocking the quarterback down and those sorts of things ultimately are more important than getting the sack in and of itself. But I understand it better with a mobile quarterback. I understand it better against an offensive line at full strength. This is an offensive line, as I said, with two interior players that were out and essentially an immobile mid-30s quarterback. And so for me, and I think it would have made a difference. The other thing is this defense is predicated on getting home because they're not able to cover as well as we thought they were going to be. And so they have to get home sometimes, in my opinion, for this defense to be really good. What I was saying about moving forward, not worrying about this defense as much is the base for a great defense is there. The philosophy for a great defense is there. I think finally Coach McDonald got in his bag a little bit in this game with those mushed up fronts and not knowing who was coming and being able to get some pressure. I think this is more of what we wanted to see from him from the beginning. And they were able to get some pressure. The issue with the defense, from what they've said, is it's mental errors, right? It's not trusting, like Leonard Williams said after the Bills game. They're not trusting one another to fill gaps. They're not trusting that their teammate is going to be there where they're supposed to be. And so they're getting out of assignment. And then it was Reek Woolen just kind of, I think, making assumptions about what his athleticism could make up for and not playing a mentally strong, mistake-free game, which led him to not being, there when the Seahawks truly needed him at the end of the game. So again, when I say I'm not worried about the defense, I'm not necessarily even talking about 2024. I'm saying long term. 24, they got to work out the communication stuff because they ain't working right now.
Yeah, I'm still not quite there yet. I think, like you said, they do have elite talent in every level, and me not seeing it come together by the end of this year would be a genuine concern for me. I'm not going to pretend like it wouldn't. I feel like the defense has enough talent to be able to execute the scheme. And I do understand the communication, but if by the end of the year we don't see some level of consistency on at least one side of the ball, that will genuinely still be a concern for me. So to me, it's about what the rest of the year looks like. In that regard, like I said, really want to see them be able to hang their hat on something and
Yes.
have some principles established and then build on that, right? And I do feel if they can find those things this year, I won't be concerned, and I think they'll be able to effectively build around that in phase two. But top tier priority, getting offensive line. I do think they could work on the edge group a little bit. I would agree with you. I think in the offseason, it'd be nice if they can sort of, you know, I'm not gonna say add depth. I think what they're just missing is a blue chip guy. I just think that's what they're missing. But they're missing a blue chip edge rusher. I know we talk about Boye
You don't think
Mafe,
Mafia is that guy?
but I think he's really good, but I'm not sure if he's going to be taking that jump to like, like a star, right? I think he got star talent, but I don't know if depending upon his matchup, if he can take
Mhm.
advantage of that and just dominate a game, right?
Mhm.
Um, he can positively impact the game. He can make some momentum plays, but I'm not sure if he can take over a game. And I think they need to take over a game edge guy in the long term. It doesn't have to be something that they get next season, but I just think that Chenna being your best pass rusher, you know, based on
I
what we know,
I don't think he
is
is. I don't think
not
he is.
gonna
I
work.
I think Mafe is the best pass rusher, talent wise. The problem with the Mafe question is they're going to have to make a decision soon because he's going to be a free agent, right? Or at least I think he's up for an extension, I believe, and then he's going to be a free agent. And so they're going to have to make a decision. What is Mafe worth to this organization? Is he worth giving an elite, edge rusher type contract to if you haven't seen that kind of production from him yet? That's going to be a tough question for the organization to ask themselves.
Right.
So I don't know. Again, the one of the things I did want to ask you though is this defense. We've agreed there's some communication issues. The talent is there for the most part. They could touch up in a couple places, but the talent for the most part is there. My question for you is, where does that blame fall? That this defense isn't yet where it needs to be? Because we hired a coach assuming that this defense was going to take a whole bunch of steps forward, right? And if they're not able to communicate and stay in assignment, to me, that falls on the coaching staff for the most part.
I'm willing to, for now, say I blame it on circumstance. For now. I think that they got a really behind start. Like they missed a couple really vital weeks in
Mhm.
terms of install. I think Mike McDonald has a lot of things that he used to do well, and it took them some time to find out what this team does well. I
Mhm.
think they're beginning to adapt to that, and I think they'll begin to make adjustments. But I also think that's a learning process. Some of that you can truly only do through trial and error. I also think that the linebackers who are they're the linchpin of this defense. They really are. Those dudes weren't available all off season.
Right.
And so like the dude who's wearing the green dot, right? Like didn't wasn't even there for practicing for most of the off season. So for now, and time will tell if it's coaching, but for now I am willing to admit that maybe the odds were more stacked against them than we thought. And
Yeah.
maybe we were just hoping that Mike McDonald's communication levels could transcend some of the obstacles that they ultimately faced.
Right.
We now know that they can because there were some true genuine obstacles to try to overcome.
Mhm.
And if we see a simplification of the playbook and this defense continue to thrive, then I think it will just boil down to circumstances that they had a lot of things they wanted to do and they realized they can be mediocre or bad at a lot of things or really good or at least good to start at a few things.
The only and I love Coach McDonald. This is the dude I wanted. Obviously the Michigan connection, all those things. If I'm thinking about it critically and I'm trying to look at, what possibly could be the problem, the one thought that scares me or the question that scares me is is he able to, and we've asked this about a lot of really talented coordinators, is he able to balance being the CEO of the team, right? Being the guy who's running the organization, running, the players and the coaches, that portion of the organization, and in inject his talent, his intelligence, his genius into the defense at the level that he did previously, right? And because there are great coordinators in this game who are not great head coaches because they haven't figured out how to strike that balance, or they haven't been able to delegate well enough or teach well enough to have the same level of impact as they did as a coordinator. You see that all the time. Teams will hire a coordinator who performed incredibly well and they fall on their face and you ask why, or they're a defensive guru and their defense falls on their face and it's because he wasn't cut out to be a CEO. Now, I don't think that's the case with Coach McDonald. I don't. I think he's going to be fine. But I do think that it's interesting that the defense is not doing all the things that he stands for, which is clear communication, which is doing the right thing all the time, right? The right assignments. Those are all the things, discipline, that he believes in. His dad went to Army, right? Something like that. Like he believes in that type of discipline. He's preached it. And the defense is doing exactly not that. So it's just, I think that is a question that has to be asked based on the performance to date of the defense, giving the level of talent that they have. But I'm with you. I think it is circumstance. I do think it's going to take longer than we thought it would. I do think not having Dotson healthy for camp, bringing in Ernest Jones week 7, right? Having Byron Murphy in and out, having the injuries on the edges, getting inconsistent play from Reek Woolen that we thought was going to be more consistent, not getting anything out of the safety position until you're putting Kobe freaking Bryant into the starting lineup, right? All these things are teams have to deal with it, but I think it's held the defense back a bit. So I'm
Yeah.
willing to give them, some grace and some time to figure it out because I don't see those are all fixable problems. Those are all things that you expect to get in line. It's not 3 turnstiles on an offensive line or 3 fire hydrants that everyone can run around and not just not having the talent to actually do the job.
Yeah, no, completely agree. I think it's a valid question about Mike McDonald, and ultimately time will tell. I do think right now he is pretty focused on the defense, and I think that's part of why we're seeing the offense suffer. I think he's beginning to realize the importance of that,
Mhm.
and maybe once he feels like he's identified his defense's, strengths, maybe he will be able to more focus because I do know that's his long-term goal.
Mhm.
But he can't have it be too long-term because I do think there's some nuance with that where you can got to be involved, particularly when you have such an inexperienced coordinator.
Mhm.
So we'll see about that. But basically, what I thought to be a episode about the game and the ups and downs of that. I mean, really, what that game says is that there are more questions than answers.
Mhm.
And there are those number of questions where we hoped that they would get answered as the season went along. And at about this midway point, we know more about who this team is. It seems like we only have more questions.
Mhm.
And that can be, a bad omen. It could also be, something that ultimately is just a natural part of the process when you're talking about so much new in a coaching staff, when you're talking about so much um I don't know if turnover is the right word, but moving pieces rather. Like I don't think this defense and who we thought would be the main contributors. Some of it's the same, but particularly for the linebackers is not, like you said, for the safeties is not. And so there have been, this team, learning that this guy isn't gonna fit what we do here.
Mhm.
Moving this over here and changing it. So there's been so much adaptation that it's been hard to sort of nail down who this team is, like actually on the field,
Mhm.
and we'll see. But it is unfortunate. You really hoped at this time in the season that you would begin to, good or bad, have a sense for what this team is. And I don't think you do. I don't think you can definitively say this
I
team is bad. I mean, they look bad, but I don't think that the team, the talent, the personnel, the coaching staff necessarily bad. It's too hard to evaluate because of the offensive line. Really, like you said, it's just a bunch of question marks. And until you fix that, it's really hard to evaluate the rest of the team. The offensive line and the quarterback are positions that it's really hard to evaluate unless like they're functioning or at least serviceable. From
So
there, you can evaluate everything else.
I'm going to agree with a portion of what you said in that the I think we know I think I know exactly who this team is. I think I know that the quarterback is above average. I know the skill positions are above average. I know the D line has tremendous talent. I know the linebackers now have a talent, and I know the secondary can be very good. I know that there's communication problems on the field. I know that there's some trust issues with playing assignment sound football on the defensive end. I believe Coach McDonald's going to get this done. I think the offensive line is so terrible. I think the offensive line is so terrible that Geno can't do his job. Receivers don't have time to get open, so the offense is not good. I won't say it's terrible, it's not good. They're also not able to hold on to the ball long enough. This defense, every single game, is getting hung out to dry. I think they looked great in the beginning of this game. They looked phenomenal. But this team had no momentum because the offense couldn't score. Imagine the offense came out and scored 10 points, and this defense is playing with his hair on fire, and the offense is sustaining like an 8, 9 minute drive, and you're able to run the ball. The defense can come out and do whatever they want. They can blitz, they can be crazy, they can put their hair on fire because they don't have to be out there over and over and over and over again because the offense can't do anything, right? So I think the offensive line has a tremendous impact on this defense. If this defense was playing on a team that had an offense that could hold on to the ball, they could come out and be crazy, but they get worn out because they're on the field the whole time. So I feel like I do know who most of this team is. I feel like I do know that this is a playoff contending, potentially NFC West winning Seattle Seahawks team if the O line could just block a little bit. I think it's that bad. I think the offensive line is that bad that it's permeating every part of this team and it's letting down the entire organization.
For sure. No, definitely. I agree with that. But I also think you named, I think when you went through everything, I think you evaluated the talent. I think you evaluated its weaknesses, but I don't think you told me who the team is. What is their identity, is what I mean. Like you named that we have an above average quarterback, we have
Sure.
above average African. I mean, yes, I understand the evaluation of talent, but who are they as a team together? I think is still a giant question mark. And yes, it is in large part because of the offensive line. I will say though, sometimes some games though, that defensive line gets pushed over from jump,
Sure.
right? So I'm also not going to blame the offense all the time on defense. There are times when they have been hung out to dry, and then there are
Mhm.
times when, frankly, like the Lions game, the offense is the only reason why it was a game.
That's the Lions, though. The Lions are hanging 40 on everybody.
I know they are, but I'm just giving an example off the top.
Sure.
There have been, I think the Bills game, frankly, they got pushed around off jump, right?
Sure.
From the snap, the defense had no, it was not even a thought that they would actually be able to, get things under control. They looked dominated from the start. And
Right.
so again, it's hard for me to always blame that on the offense because that's not always the story. It's been up and down on both sides of the ball every week. And I don't know what to make of that. That's why I say I have so many question marks is you get one performance this week from this side of the ball and a completely opposite performance the next week.
Right.
It's
I
so up and
guess
down.
I just trust that the defense is going to be fine in the long run
Yeah, I get that.
because of the talent and because of the coach. I think the
Yeah,
defense is going to be fine. I want it to be great. I think it's going to be fine. I think it could be great. I can't
right.
say that
Fair.
about the offense, and that's what I'm getting at. And from an identity standpoint, I think, Coach McDonald's defense will look better over time because the players will understand it better, right?
Yeah.
They've talked about having to simplify the defense because really they're thinking too much and not just playing football.
Yes.
If you give them another offseason, you give them a full season in 24 and an
Mhm.
offseason, and you bring back the majority of those guys, they're going to be playing faster because they're not thinking, right?
Right.
So I think the defense is going to be fine. When I look at the offense, I can't say that.
Yeah.
I can't even Charles Cross is my dog. I love Charles Cross. I can't
Same
even
here.
say that about him right now, right? Because he's getting pushed back into the quarterback.
Hmm.
He's getting tore up.
Yep.
And it's sad for me to see because he was the one guy who I thought they could count on. So I think from an identity. The other thing is I I'm still enthusiastic about Ryan Grubb, but I don't know what he's necessarily trying to do with this offense, right?
Yeah.
Or, there's a part of me that understands. I'm like, look, he's just trying to like hang on and react because this line is so bad and DK's out now and you can't stress the field and all those things. But maybe just say this is what we're gonna do and just do that, knowing that you might not be great at it. I want to see them just continue to try to run the ball
I
with
don't.
different,
Didn't we see that with Pete Carroll? I really don't want to see that.
but Ryan Grubb is smarter, right? Ryan Grubb is smarter. He's more innovative. He's not Shane Waldron. He's more innovative than that.
Okay, but remember what I just said. These guys are being schemed to be blocked. Most of the time, they just get beat off the snap. I mean, how how much innovation can save that? I mean, I hear you, but I don't want to see them run their head into the wall. That would for sure to me, and I think even to Mike McDonald be a sign that Grubb isn't the guy. I think they should experiment. And in a perfect world, yes, you'd love to have consistency at this point in the season. That's not where they're at personnel wise. You got to
No,
explore different options and see what you're good at this point.
but
Doing
running the
something
ball is
over
not
again, you learn nothing. You learn nothing.
the goal of running the ball, though, is not necessarily to gain a bunch of yards, right? The goal of running the ball is to force the linebackers and the safeties to play up so that you can run play action so it can loosen it up, right? You bring the linebackers up and you can start completing some of those 15-yard routes, 18-yard routes, right? Right over the head of the linebackers. That's what I'm saying is you have to have that balance. You have to try to run the ball in order to free up the pass if you're not going to be that dynamic, if you're going to not be one dimensional. And so that's what I want to see
Agree
from him.
to a
I'm
point.
not saying go out and run the ball for 200 yards. Would I love to see it? For sure. Absolutely. Right? I got to put the Michigan hat on for that. But at least try to establish the run in a different way than they have, right? I want to see, we're not even really like there's no I'm not expecting them to be the Dolphins from 23 or the Niners or whatnot, but watch those running games look different. They look different.
Well, there's not a ton of variety in his run game schemes. I'll agree with that, but I
Right.
also think that's a playbook install issue that I'm not sure you can fix in the middle of the season. Like, I
Right.
agree
At
with
your
you that the
center,
design of the run game is probably not diverse enough because he didn't count enough on his guys being unable to run block because of the personnel. You look at the personnel on paper and you say, well, we'll be able to get a guy, move a hat on a hat.
Anthony Bradford should be able to move a dude,
Exactly.
right?
Right. So I
Yeah.
understand why it's not.
The circumstantial argument, which again, makes a lot of sense that you made earlier. When did Connor Williams join the team? Right? Week one,
Right.
essentially.
Right.
Mike Jarrell was not drafted in the sixth round, out of a D2 school, expecting for him to start at right tackle week 6.
Yep.
That wasn't the expectation, right? And so
Right.
here's as raw as could be, right tackle, and a center who you brought in at the last second as 40% of your starting offensive line, right? So
Right.
I think to that point, you're right. It's hard to install really interesting stuff under those circumstances, but I see Dominic Pooney doing it right down
Well,
the
well,
road.
well, Shanahan's had years to get that run. You know what I mean? Like that's not comparison.
Well, but there's
Shanahan's had
turnover on
years to
that line. There
perfect
has
his
been
run
turnover on that
game.
line, though. There's been turnover on the line. What I'm saying is try some new stuff. I almost cuss. I'm sorry. Try some new stuff, right? Like there's
I
just
think they're doing that enough, but I understand the situation you're in. You can't go out there throwing stuff at the wall either. You like your guys need to understand what's happening and
right.
installing entire new concepts. I don't think that's how NFL football works. I really don't. Like I think at a certain point, your playbook is your playbook, and you can't create a new playbook on the fly. I don't think you can do that.
Well, it's a good thing. Then it's a good thing that they got a bye week, right? Because it's time to install
You
some new
can't
stuff.
install a whole new playbook on the bye
I'm
week.
not saying a new playbook. Give me a couple different run schemes. Here's okay. More specific example. You install a couple of running plays, say two or three running plays under center, right? That you're not just running on third and fourth and short, right? You're getting under center intentionally. You install that running play. It could be something simple. It could be, stretch play, whatever it might be. Then you install a play action off of that, right? Where maybe it's like a three-level play action to one side of the field, where the tight end is running one route, right? The one receiver is running like a kind of a 15 to 18 yard route, and then you've got a deep route, and now you've got multiple options for Geno to go through, right? And then you install that same play, but then you got the tight end going to the opposite side. Whatever it might be, what I'm saying is take a basic running play, right? Install it, or it might already be there, but install it and have it be some kind of under center different look. Then
Yeah,
install the play action off of that. Then install a different play action off of that. And do that for two or three different formations or different plays. All of a
yeah,
sudden
that's
now
fair.
you got 6, 9 different plays that give the opposition different looks out of the same formation. To me, that
Right.
could be a game changer, right? And it seems so
Yeah,
simplistic to me. That's
potentially.
something you
You
can install in a bye
still need
week.
to execute, but I hear you. You still need a guy to execute, and I don't know if we can do that. But I hear you.
Gotta try,
I
right? You
agree
gotta
with you on
try.
paper. On paper, I agree with you.
This team makes
Okay.
me crazy.
But yeah, man, there's a lot to discuss with this team, and we can go on about just sort of the questions. Um, Unfortunately, I think we'll have some time to to
Right?
discuss, um, where this team is and where they can do moving forward. But if there are any other high points you wanted to mention, we can get into that. But if not, let's wrap it up. Tell people where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter, Tino Jr. 20, TINOJR20. Still working on my database, which is taking up a lot of time, but a lot of fun. I got outfielders and then move on to pitching. Obviously that's baseball. I don't know. I'm preparing for this week. I don't know what this week is going to bring. I wish every listener, everybody, you in particular, Candace, like, be safe. Um, Hopefully it's time to celebrate. I don't know, I'm not trying to tell people what side to be on, but I'm trying to tell people what side to be on. Care about your neighbor, take care of one another,
Absolutely.
Where I live here in Walla Walla, Washington, it's I can't say it's always friendly, And
Yeah,
so there's a lot on the line, and just take care of your loved ones, and just hopefully we can get along. Let's just say that. I believe in
for
getting
sure.
along. I
For sure.
be respectful and
Yeah.
get
We need some peace.
we do.
So
That's where my brain's
definitely,
at, honestly. Like, as much as I love football, as much as I love baseball, basketball, sports is incredibly important, but um to me this is a very pivotal moment, and that's kind of where my head is, if I'm being honest with you.
yep. So we encourage you guys as we record here. Hopefully, as you listen to this tomorrow or later on tonight, you get out and vote. You may not feel like you can make a difference, but you absolutely can make a difference. So please get out and vote. We appreciate you guys listening. Appreciate your support. Continue to support the show. If you haven't already, if you listen to us on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. Like the video. We're working really hard. We hope to bring you guys and continue to grow and get better with you guys. So we need you guys to share, tell a friend, tell a family
Mhm.
member who supports the team, who supports the city. Um, and we will be able to grow together from there. So be sure if you're listening just on iTunes, you can give us a follow, give us a review. I will shout out any reviews that we get, 5-star reviews especially, which I shout those out if we get them. So please be sure to do that and follow the show at Seahawks 360 Pod. It's at Seahawks 360 Pod. That's it. That's all the time we have for today. That's it. We're out. And as always,
Go
go
Hawks.
Hawks.